So anytime I do a presentation, I make it more interactive. So last year at Emancipation Day, I would say emancipation, and you say free black nation. So let's try that. Emancipation. Free black nation. Emancipation. Free black nation. Very good. And we're going to rotate back and forth between saying free black nation and free African nation. When I say black, I mean African. When I say African, I mean black. So let's try that again. Emancipation. The second time, free African nation. Emancipation? Very good, let's continue. Now, this talk, we talk about Pan-Africanism. I want to introduce a new term called Pan-Kemetism. Then we talk about Kemet. This Kemet means black, and then when you see a man and a woman in the plural sign, it means people. And that's what the people of ancient Egypt called themselves. They called themselves black people. And then when they have this sign of a human settlement, it's the same Kem, meaning black, and then here meaning land of black people. And that's what the people of ancient Egypt called the land. They said land of black people. Emancipation? Free black nation. Emancipation? Free black nation. Emancipation? Free African nation. Very good. So we'll deal with the continued struggle for the emancipation of African, which equals black people, and the land of black people. Now you're wondering, well, what is this Kemet that I'm talking about? This Kemet that I'm talking about here is the word Kem itself means black, and that's what we see here. And then Kemet, the black land, what they refer to as Egypt. And then the Kemet with the man and the woman is what they refer to as Egyptians. But literally, when you say Kemet, you're saying black people here, or Kemet, meaning land of black people. Let's continue. Now there's a quote from the Honorable Malcolm X where he says, just because a cat has kittens in an oven, you don't call the kittens biscuits. Just because a cat has kittens in the oven, you don't call the kittens biscuits. This means black people who are taken from Africa, just because they go to a different location, you don't say, well, now they've magically become biscuits, right? They're still Africans, that their essential nature hasn't changed just because of a change in location. And again, however, we have some degree of hypocrisy because we have people who will say we're still Africans even though we've changed location, but we have occupied African land. And that's what I'm going to be dealing with is North Africa is occupied by a lot of Arabs. So many will not raise their voices against the land of black people that has been usurped by Eurasians in North Africa to this very day. So even though they say we're still Africans, even though our location has changed, well, they're still Arabs, even though their location has changed. But we don't want to apply this principle across the board, and it's not clear why. So some are ignorant that that land in North Africa used to be owned by black people, and other people, it's not that they don't know, it's that they've been paid or collaborators intentionally. So even though some people would say, all right, we're still African because even though we've gone abroad, in other places through enslavement, so forth and so on, they don't want to say, well, those Arabs are still Arabs even though they've stolen the land in North Africa. So we continue. Now there's a proverb in Wolof, which is one of the languages I speak. And in Wolof we say, Lubans Yadgan Tindoh, Du Tak Musopaliku Muk Jasi. It translates to no matter how long a log remains in the water, it never becomes a crocodile. Right? So those Africans who are taken from Africa and now they call themselves, whatever they call themselves, Jamaicans or Cubans or Afro this or Afro that or whatever, that these are all black people, these are all African people. Emancipation? Emancipation? Very good. And again, no matter how long a log remains in the water, it never becomes a crocodile. We have the same thing in Akan. And it translates to, a log will never turn into a crocodile no matter how long it remains in the water. Emancipation? Emancipation? Emancipation. Very good. Now, when we think of North Africa, many people think about these types of people, right? This is what many people, how many people think of these types of people when you think of North Africa? You think of the Egypt football team or Tunisia or whatever. However, these are not the indigenous people to that place. Or they'll think about these in Western Sahara, or these in Tunisia, these in Morocco, these in Egypt, these in Algeria. But again, these are, in the history of African people, very recent migrants into there. Or they think about these, right? President of Algeria, or Libya, or King of Morocco, all of these people. But again, the original people in North Africa were black people. And I'll show you the archaeological evidence that goes into that. Let me play this for you.
A rock shelter in the Libyan desert. The site of an unprecedented discovery. A tiny mummified child. Until the moment he was unearthed, everyone thought the Egyptians had invented mummification in Africa. But this discovery led Dr. Savino Delernia and his team to develop a new theory which challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt.
Mummification knowledge wasn't born in Egypt, but in another place, in another culture, in another part of the history of Africa.
Who were these people? Where did they come from? How did they achieve this incredible high standard of mummification at such an early date?
An unknown people mummifying their dead long before the Egyptians? It was this child who would prove to be the key to unlocking a long-lost African culture. The Sahara. This is the largest desert in the world. It's also one of the hottest places on Earth.
Hung, I'ma give you a slug, and when it comes to reparations, we gon' take it in blood, yeah.
Archaeologist Dr. Savino Delernia of the University of Rome has been driving for 2 days. Ahead of him lies his destination, the Caucasus Mountains in southwestern Libya. It's a North African country. To the west is Algeria. To the east, Egypt. This inhospitable terrain has driven away all but a handful of Tuareg nomads, but it was once home to a family who mummified their child. Year after year, Savino returns to this majestic landscape, hoping to uncover its secrets. It all began 40 years ago with the discovery of the little mummified boy, Juan Mahujaj. He took his name from the rock shelter where he was found. It has taken Savino and his colleagues decades to reveal the full significance of this discovery.
I think that mummy and the rock shelter really started the archaeological and historical reconstruction of the ancient civilizations here in the Sahara.
We think of Libya's population today as largely Middle Eastern, yet the team still believed that thousands of years ago this area was inhabited by black Africans from the south. But apart from some rock art depicting black hunters, archaeologists had no proof of this. The mummy changed all that.
The significance of the black mummy is very great. We have the first evidence of black people in the area, that it was supposed to be, but we hadn't hard evidence of this.
This was the beginning of an extraordinary quest that would ultimately reveal an unknown African culture. The Juan Mahujaj rock shelter is a simple place, a ledge just wide enough to provide shade from the midday sun. Savino has returned to the rock shelter, where he meets Tuareg tribesman Mr. Ramadani, who witnessed the discovery of the mummy. They focus on one small area, the place where Savino's predecessor, Professor Mori, actually found the mummy.
It was still already visible because it was partially brought to light by natural erosion. So we have to imagine that the exact position of the Juan Mahujaj mummy should be somewhere just here.
When a small sack came to light, no one was prepared for what it contained.
They opened this sack and they found the mummy inside. So it was really amazing.
Soon after he died, this young boy was put in a fetal position, then embalmed and placed in a sack made of antelope skin. The sack was then insulated by a layer of leaves. This careful preparation protected his small body from the elements for the next 5,500 years. The Italian archaeologists knew they had found important evidence. The shape of the boy's skull suggested he was black, and if he was, this could rewrite the history of mummification in Africa. They needed to be sure. After a tortuous 10-day camel journey to the nearest town with their fragile cargo, the team returned to Rome to have the mummy analyzed. Dr. Giorgio Manzi of the University of Rome is the world's foremost expert on human remains in Libya, and his department boasts an impressive collection of Libyan skulls.
The reason why the members of the Italian team in the 50s inferred that the child was a black child, a Negro child, is mainly a consideration of his face, especially the length here of the root of the nose, or also here, the moving forward of the mouth.
The mummy's teeth also revealed his age at death.
When the Italian team first examined the Wamouja child, they looked at the teeth and found that he was very young. Especially using X-rays, it was easy to determine the exact age, looking at teeth still in the bone, in the alveolus.
So the team had established that Juan Mahujaj was a black, 2.5-year-old boy. But it was the results of the carbon dating which were so amazing. Juan Mahujaj was 5,600 years old. This made him the oldest black mummy ever found in Africa. But where did he come from? Who had mummified this boy 1,000 years before the Egyptians supposedly invented mummification in Africa? The origins of Juan Mahujaj, the Black Mummy, were a mystery. To find out more about the boy, Savino returns to the Tripoli Museum where the mummy now rests.
I think the most impressive evidence of mummification is the skin on the skull. You can see all around the skull the skin of the child. You can see here, just along the spine and the rib cage, we have a lot of skin, which is really very, very rare to be found. You see here the remains of this organic matter. This is really the remains of the true interior of the mummy. It's impossible to find this kind of evidence without the process of mummification. Another point is the first act of mummification is a cut along the stomach and the removal of all the interiors. And probably they put something in, inorganic matter, just to stop any kind of bacterial activity inside, as much as the Egyptians did in the Nile Valley.
What makes Juan Mahujaj unique is that he's the oldest eviscerated mummy ever found in Africa. Incisions were made along his stomach and thorax. Then his organs were removed, and an organic preservative inserted to stop his body from decomposing. And it was this process which put the Black Mummy on the world stage.
Now you can look at that documentary online, but this is Juan Mahujaj, and you can still see the blackness of his skin. And the text to look at is Mummy's Disease in Ancient Cultures by Cockburn, and Raymond. But I want people to understand that when we talk about North Africa, that this was again part of the land of black people that has now been usurped by non-blacks. So in modern times, pale white Eurasians, primarily Arabs, in their colonization and usurping of African, which equals black land, does not make them African, which equals black, especially with an indigenous African view of black and African as synonyms. Emancipation? Emancipation? Emancipation! Very good. So if you look at Akan, for example, Obibini, has anyone ever heard that name, Obibini? When you say Obibini, the Bibi in it means black. When you say Abibifor, again the Bibi means black. When you say Abibimai, you're saying the exact same thing that the word Kemet meant, which means land of the black people. When you talk about Abibidro, you're talking about black medicine, medicine that's indigenous to African people. Same thing in the Yoruba language. When we conceive of this land in our own language, this is how we look at it. Adulawa, which means black in color. Ile Adulawa is the word for Africa, which is the land of those who are black in color. Emancipation? I need more participation. Emancipation? Emancipation? Very good. Same thing in Bambara, Farafin, which means person who is black, Farafina, land of black people. This is how they refer to Africa in the language of Bambara. And what of Nitkunyu, person who is black, real Nitkunyu, land of humans who are black. Same thing in Kikongo, Ndombe. Let's say it together, Ndombe. 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 Very good. This is how they refer to black people, which means African. And then in Siabandombe, land of the blacks. Now you would think that this is just a modern thing. Maybe they just started to call themselves black when white people came in and said, look, we're black. But you have to go back over 5,000 years ago to Kemetism, which is what the people of what you now call ancient Egypt referred to themselves. They called themselves black people. Very good. And then they called their land Kemet, which means land of black people. And this is how they depicted themselves, right? Just like the ladies, I see Amadele there in the back looking just like this one here. Emancipation? Emancipation? Now, it wasn't only us, and as referred to as our good prof, Campbell, that when they say Ethiopia, that's coming from Greek, which means land of burnt faces, meaning the black people. In Latin, they say Niger, which again means black. Even the Arabs, they refer to the land as Bilad as-Sudan, land of the blacks. So everyone was clear. The Arabs themselves, who have come in as colonizers, our very first colonizers and imperialists, they still refer to this land as land of black people. They knew that they were not indigenous to this land. So now we ask the question, who were the Kemetism? Who were these black people? And this is the founder of Kemet. Emancipation? Emancipation? This is the founder of Kemet looking like a young Mike Tyson, right? This is Jamrock. And this is our own photograph of Amos, right? Amos Nepetira. And this was the African who was able to first drive out these Eurasian invaders and colonizers. We should say his name and know who he is. Now when you look at him, he makes Wama Hujaj even look light. Look at how black this African is. And this is my own photograph, right? Going there and seeing my African ancestor who helped liberate the land of African people and the very first war of African liberation on this continent against the Hyksos. Emancipation? Emancipation? Now, if we go back to the oldest corpus of spiritual texts in the history of the world, our good professor mentioned spirituality. The oldest spiritual texts in the history of the world are known as the pyramid texts. And in the pyramid text, this is where we have the word Kemetism, meaning black people, and this translates to you stand at the core of those of the black land as the Apis bull, right? Now the whites, they like to say, well, they just mean black land. It's a term for cultivable soil along the banks of the Nile or the Delta. They tried to change the history and say, no, they weren't saying that they were black. They were saying that the land itself was black, the soil is black. Which is ridiculous, but we'll show them that there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Because in the theology of those people themselves, it said they were made on the potter's wheel by Khnum out of that black soil. So in their own concept of creation, they say that they are made out of the blackest soil, right? So again, coming from the hymn to Khnum, another hymn to Khnum Re, God of the potter's wheel, who settled the land by his handiwork. He formed all on his potter's wheel, Tatanen who made all that is on their soil. So if you come from soil that is black, then you too will be black. Emancipation? Emancipation? Emancipation! 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 Very good. We continue. So again, they refer to this as Emancipation. So Emancipation, meaning that black mud, that black soil, and if you look at it, it's about the color of black people. And this is what they said in their own creation story, what they were made out of is this black soil. And again, here you see a determinative of human settlement. So they refer to themselves as black people, then they refer to their land as land of black people. We continue. Now they also refer to themselves as citizens of Kemet, which is the term Remet. And you see it translated as man, mankind, or Egyptians. Man, mankind, or Egyptians, shown like this. Now, how did they depict themselves in their own artwork? As the blackest of the black people you will ever see. And again, just like how you saw there in the dictionary, Remet, those who may not be literate in the language of Kemet, this is exactly what you see here, Remet, man, woman, plural. And this is how they depicted themselves. Now, are these black people? Are these black people? Now, when you talk about Egypt today, you think about Arabs. But again, these are very recent migrants to the land of black people. When you think about Libya today, you think about Arabs. But again, we've shown you that at one point in time, that land that has now been stolen, it was occupied by black people, the original people of this land. Now, interestingly, the people Remet, they showed themselves as two complexions, and they showed the Nubians as two complexions, but they showed themselves, the people of Kemet and the people of Nubia, as being the same. And then these are the Arab types that you see there now. And they refer to them as Amu, the Hyksos, these invaders that Amos was able to expel and kick out. And then these are those who are in Libya by the time of Ramesses III, which is around 1186 to 1155 BCE. We continue. They showed the Nubian here the same as they showed all of the other people of Kemet. And you see them still carrying the linguist staff just like they do in Ghana to this day. So if we saw this today, we would say Adriana. If we saw this today, we would say Ekwana. If we saw this today, we would say Oyokwo. But this is the exact same thing you found on the walls of Kemet before it was invaded by our first imperialists and colonialists. So again, here he says, he came and ruled the black land, he came and nourished the black land. Now this is a translation from Littan. But here you see it doesn't have the determinative for a land. It has a man and a woman, which means people. So it says he came, actually it says he came and ruled the black people. He came and nourished the black people. Emancipation? Emancipation. And again, this is Seth Anta joke, where it says the Egyptians had only one term to designate themselves, Kemet. The Negroes, literally. This is the strongest term and the pharaonic term to indicate blackness. Again, he's saying that according to the people themselves, they call themselves black people. We continue. Now, Steve Biko, I hope people have heard that name, but in modern times, he says the same thing that our ancient ancestors say, where he says that the fact that we are not all not white does not necessarily mean that we are all black. He refers to black people, real black people, are those who can manage to hold their heads high in defiance rather than willingly surrender their souls to the white man. Black consciousness is in essence the realization by the black man of the need to rally together with his brothers around the cause of their operation, the blackness of their skin, and to operate as a group in order to rid themselves of the shackles that bind them to perpetual servitude. So just like Steve Biko was saying in modern times, this is what we did in ancient times. Emancipation? Emancipation? Very good, let's continue. Now we come to these Eurasians who we now find in modern day North Africa. Now, Eurasians have what are called Neanderthal genes. Now this isn't me saying it, this is National Geographic. And according to National Geographic, everyone living outside of Africa today has a small amount of Neanderthal in them. This is a hominin that is not a full Homo sapiens sapien, right? And they say a team of scientists comparing the full genomes of the two species concluded that most European and Asians have between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. Indigenous sub-Saharan Africans have no Neanderthal DNA because their ancestors did not migrate through Asia, right? So again, we're saying that this is a fundamental difference between the indigenous black people and those who invaded. We continue. Now also in the genes you have what's called SLC24A5, and for the original nucleotide you have alanine, but the Eurasians have what is called threonine. Emancipation? Emancipation? Now if you look at this map, where you see the yellow is where you also find the black people to this day. So we can talk about ancient Kemet, but we can also talk about modern Kemet, all the places where black people are located, places like Jamaica, places like the continent. But here you see that this land has been usurped by our very first colonists and imperialists. If you are against imperialism, you have to be against these Eurasians who have taken over the land of black people, if you have any principles. Again, the map is right side up because the oldest map in the history of the world comes from Africa, and that map is a south up map, and this is it, right? So anytime you see Africa upside down, you should correct people and say, your Africa is upside down. It should be south up. Right? Because the word for south was up, the word for north was down. Imen meant west and right, and Yabit meant east and left. This means Somalia is on your left and Dakar is on your right. Emancipation? Emancipation? King Tut. This is how he was depicted. And his closest genetic relatives are found in southern Africa, African Great Lakes, and tropical West Africa. That means you. Emancipation? Ramesses III, who the image before came from his tomb, his closest genetic relatives are in the African Great Lakes, Southern Africa, and tropical West Africa. And that's you. So again, Kemet means the land of black people. We'll continue. So African intellectuals and educators must question who is integrating with whom. Are we talking about the original Pan-Africanism, which is talking about black people, or the counterfeit hijacked anti-black one? So we must engage the problematic tradition in which integration is to occur between anyone who happens to be on the African continent, without regard to whether or not such integrationism is in the ultimate interest of African black indigents, which are the original black people of this land. Now the original goals, has anyone ever heard the term Pan-Africanism? By show of hands, Pan-Africanism. Very good. Now most people don't know the history of this word Pan-Africanism, and our good prof, he went a bit into it. I want to go a little bit deeper. In the 1900 conference on Pan-Africanism, the first goal out of the 7 was to promote unity, feeling, and friendly intercourse among the Negro African race. Anytime they were talking about Pan-Africanism, they were talking about black people, not our imperialist Arabs who have colonized North Africa. They said to achieve self-rule with civil rights and responsible black governments for colonized Negro countries. Again, they're talking about who? Black people. Emancipation? Emancipation? It says to achieve voting rights, physical security, prosperity, progress, and justice for Africans abroad, Negroes in the countries of the white race. To promote the business interests of Africans abroad, African people living in the countries of the whites, which now unfortunately includes North Africa, to create a great central Negro state in Africa for the black race. And at that time they were talking about Congo. And then to secure integrity and independence for self-governing Negro countries. They included Ethiopia, Haiti, and Liberia by name, and any others that emerged. And to earn for the Negro race equality with and respect of the other races of humanity. Now you have some people who talk about Pan-Africanism, but they don't mean black people. They mean all of our very first imperialists and colonists who have stolen the land of black people. Let's continue. And this is why last year when Haiti applied to join the African Union, guess what happened? They were rejected because you have this counterfeit, fraudulent Pan-Africanism, which says Haiti, who the term was invented for, that they're not African because they've changed their location. Now remember we said if a cat has kittens in an oven, that doesn't make them biscuits. So by the same token that an African from the US or from Jamaica can claim to be an African, it's on the principle that their fundamental nature has not changed. However, when Morocco, who is still enslaving black people to this very day, applied to join the African Union, guess what? Open arms. Because, again, you have a fraudulent Pan-Africanism that took the term from the people who originated it for black people, and now Morocco is in, Haiti is out. The term was invented with Haiti in mind, but they're now kept out. And Morocco, who was still enslaving black people, are allowed in. So you should look up Black Morocco, a history of slavery, race, and Islam. Here is from the Observer, being black in Morocco, I get called a slave. Morocco ranks 29 in the Global Modern Slavery Index. Here again, you have Atlanta Black Star, 6 African countries that are hostile now towards black people, La Perle Noire. And this is a periodical in Morocco where they're saying this is a great black threat, even though this is the land that was originally occupied by nothing but black people. Emancipation? Emancipation? Very good. So when we're talking about Africanness and blackness, we're talking about not only genotype, but also phenotype, but then allegiance. Because you have some people who are black only on their skin, but they have no allegiance to the African race and will deliver us right to Morocco, right to our very first colonists and imperialists with absolutely no morals to subside. And this is sometimes because of being employed at white institutions, so they can be compromised and not have allegiance due to employment or miseducation. Also compromised biogenetically. How can this young child expect to fight for black people, right? Because they have a white parent. So this is another way that is potential way to compromise. Compromise ideologically, they follow Marx and Engels or Adam Smith. All of these white people, they give you your ideologies, so now you will never fight for black people. We have to be uncompromised and uncompromising. We continue. Compromised through religion. If you pray to this white man or to a rock in the desert, you may be compromised because of that. How can you stand up for the rights of black people when you are serving this imaginary white man 24/7? Emancipation? Emancipation? Some are compromised financially. If they're giving you their money, then now how can you speak up for black people, right? So however, now with the African Union, you have Amnesty International reporting abduction, torture, and rape of migrants in Libya. These are the black people, and this is how they are treated. Their kidneys are removed. They are whipped and beaten and held at gunpoint. Because even though we don't know that they're not Africans, these Arabs are very clear on who they are and who we are. So in conclusion, Eshe, Aniche, Edamase, Matondo Maminge, Asante Nisana, Morakoze. Thank you very much. Emancipation? Emancipation?